session this evening. Remy will be joining us for our regular session on the phone this evening. Wendy is out of town traveling this evening. So we'll turn our discussion over on a discussion of the fire department recovery, cost recovery, and so Chief Lippert will ask you to address the council.
Mr. Mayor and councilors, we're here this evening to put some concepts on the table for council to review and make some have some discussion on and give staff direction, hopefully whether or not at the end of the night at the next council meeting on some areas that you would like us to see whether or not we should move forward in cost recovery for the fire department. We've taken the liberty of examining a lot of different opportunities for cost recovery that other departments in Oregon are using, and we kind of want to share them with council tonight. There are a variety of subject areas. We'll share what we're currently doing for cost recovery and then expand into some areas that we're currently not using for cost recovery for the fire department as we are currently. Some of them expand on what we're currently doing. Some of them are totally new concepts. Okay. Our focus this evening is in our fire prevention realm, and proactive fire inspections and prevention programs enhance the safety of the citizens and the property within the city of McMinnville. As a municipal jurisdiction, as a jurisdiction having jurisdiction in the fire code enforcement world, one of our roles is to do code enforcement according to the state fire codes as directed by the state Fire Marshal's office. Current fees, we have some fee schedules that have been passed, a couple that have been rescinded recently, so we didn't speak to those, but the ones that we currently have that are in component, we charge a fee for second re-inspections. So if a fire inspector or a fire marshal or deputy fire marshal go out and conduct an inspection, and it's unsuccessful, there are some violations that occur. We come back a second time with a follow-up, which is a freebie. If they still have not corrected the violations, we have to come back a third time, which is called a second reinspection. Then there would be a fee associated with that. We have fees for non-code required inspections. So if we haven't conducted an inspection within that year and a certain type of facility requires an inspection from the state and we go out and conduct the inspection because they're requiring it or the state requires it, not us, we charge them for that inspection. And then we charge for environmental reviews that are mandated by the fire department to handle. We charge for standby fees, fire and rescue standby fees, hazmat responses, and vehicle accidents, non-resident or full reimbursement according to conflagration rates, state conflagration rates. We charge for fire alarm responses, medical alarm responses, and those are 3 within a 6-month period. So if we have a reoccurring offender on a certain facility that's not taking care of their systems, the third response in 6 months we'll get a charge for that. We charge for burning in violation of the code. We have some limited operational permits, which include fireworks and event permits. And as you're aware, we do EMS fees and emergency vehicle standby fees. One of the opportunities that we have to expand to capture some revenue for costs would be additional permits, and we can include annual permitting process for operational permits. And the state has a list, a significant list of operational permits that we are not currently using or enforcing. Aircraft refueling is one of them. Fuel tank installations have kind of by default have been transitioned to the fire service. Building codes do not enforce, or the building division does not enforce fuel tank installations that are separate from facilities, and so that falls by default to the fire department. We're not charging for those reviews or site inspections or any of the work that gets done with those types of things now. Welding operations is one example. Another example that just came into the 2019 code that was just recently passed are food carts. If you've seen the news a lot of food carts that are not getting regular inspections tend to have propane leaks and issues. So that would be another option for us to put into the process. And there are 25 operational permits within the state fire code that we could pick up on. We could easily come back with some recommendations, and if that's the direction the council wanted us to go in, that would be one thing. So additional permits is one thing. Operational permits is one thing. Another would be a modification to our inspection fee schedules. Inspections for new owners of existing buildings. For new owners of existing buildings, so if someone sells me their business and I come in and take over their business, the fire department does not have any of the accurate information, and a new owner does not have any of the knowledge required to meet the code requirements for that facility. So we would require an inspection for that. Currently, we don't do that. Currently, if there's a change of occupancy and we catch it, either us or the building department, we refer each other to go out and work and tag team that process. But as it sits currently, a change of ownership without a change of occupancy does not flag an inspection. And with new owners or a new person in that role, there should be some sort of fire safety inspection in that facility. So that is something we are not currently doing that we would like to move and make it a requirement. And then move to some of the options around inspection fees within the state that the other departments are using. They move to an initial inspection fee in an attempt to try and recover their costs. So instead of waiting until the third time out, they charge the first time out for an inspection rate based on cost of the inspection. And it's based on the size of the facility, the hazard complexity of the facility, or a combination of both, and multiple departments do it multiple ways, and that would be one of those optional items that we would look at. Some departments charge for the first, the second, the third inspection sequentially. Some departments charge for the first inspection and include the second one as part of the inspection process in case there has to be follow-up, and some charge like we do currently. So, but there are a variety of options and ways that they're currently doing it, but getting us the initial charge for the first inspection at a minimum would be in the right direction, I believe, if that was something council wanted to entertain. And I'm going to allow Chief McDermott to speak to this because this inspection schedule, and I just threw that on her, so I know she knows this stuff. This was her brain I was picking while I was typing all this stuff in. But I'm going to let Chief McDermott speak to this because this is the current frequency we use for inspections within McMinnville. Most of it is based on the state requirements for an exempt department or city, but some of it we have modified slightly, and I'll allow Debbie to speak to those things. But
so currently and historically, since I've been here, we kind of came up with a risk plan analysis on what we feel our risks here in the city of McMinnville are, and we have our annuals, and then every 2 year and then every 3. And under our annuals, we've always conducted on the I's, which would be hospitals, jails, and nursing care homes, and also included in that would be the schools and licensed daycares. Schools by state are only allowed every 2 years. However, we've always felt it was very important to get into our schools and keep them safe and functioning for all the students. And so we have conducted those on an annual basis. Our fraternities and dormitories have a high risk just for the age and behavior of those folks. And we have thought that it's very important, and we've been into those on an annual basis for the past couple decades. And then we move into the care homes, halfway houses, and social rehabs. Those are also done on an annual basis, partly due to their licensing requirements and their requests. So we have done those for significant number of years on an annual basis. A new state law that was just passed is states that all local fire jurisdictions shall inspect all wrecking yards. This has happened because of the large fire in downtown Portland that had environmental and many other impacts. So that just recently passed, and I believe we have a minimum of 3. There may be 4 or 5 hidden out there, 2 other ones hidden out there that we're not real knowledgeable about, but would fall into that category. And so that's something we'll have to pick up on an annual basis. Our A2 occupancy, which are assembly over anything over 49, and bars and nightclubs, those fall into the higher hazard class as well, as just due to the nature of the number of people and the behaviors. On a biannual, we've tried to get to all of the other types of assembly occupancies, which would be theaters, concert halls, community halls. The H occupancy, which would be those that have hazardous materials. We tried to get into those, and then our 1, 2 hotels and apartments every other year. B&M occupancy, which are our lowest hazards, which would be a business office or a small mercantile. Those would fall typically on a 3 to 5 year option, as I've been here, due to depending on staffing. However, on our 3rd Street, we have tried to get to all of 3rd Street either annually or biannually. Realistically, we look at if we can get down to them every other year with our staffing levels. That's probably about as good as we can do. And the reason for that is obvious: the high economic value of those buildings and the age, and the fact that they're built, they're stacked, and they have a lot of penetrations one to the other, would allow for a lot of fire flow. And then our 3-year cycles are the larger, less hazardous assemblies, such as churches, swimming pools, and stadiums. They may have a lot of people, but the behaviors and the use are lower hazard than the other A occupancies. Factories in an industrial area, I personally believe we should get into them at least every 2 years, some of them probably every year, but our staffing levels have never allowed for that. So we put them on the 3-year cycle. And again, the low hazard B&Ms are on the 3.
So one of the things that we haven't done is financially penalize people for failure to meet code. And one of the things that we have been looking at doing in the last year, as the city passed the civil penalties ordinance, was piggybacking on the civil penalties ordinance with the code enforcement. That ordinance does speak to code enforcement officer and allows it to apply to us also. So we would want, or would like council to, we recommend to council entertain the option of applying some civil penalties to types of hazards that have the violations that have not been successfully mitigated. And that would range in anything from nothing for minor mitigations to small fees for minor mitigations to large fees for disabled life safety systems and blocked exits and those types of things. A large number of the departments around have some pretty healthy fees for the disabled life safety systems, and some go from a $25 fee for lower penalties to no fee for lower penalties. So it's just one of those things that we wanted to put on the table for council to understand that is something that we're not doing currently, that is not as a revenue generator, but it does provide some behavior correction if there is a cost associated with some of the more significant items that or not correcting items that have already been identified. And then one of the other items that we're currently not doing that almost all of the other municipalities that we evaluated do are fire prevention plan reviews. We work with the building department on several of the opportunities, the development opportunities, facility opportunities, and we evaluate fire department access, water supply, hydrant replacement, locks boxes, and then we spoke about the above ground fuel tanks, and a large number of the other communities do charge for that service, and we're not charging for that service as a matter of norm. It's just a time and energy expended on fire department's part to address those issues. When we were making sure that
Zach has.
Yes, sir.
Sorry to jump in. Can I just confirm what you'd said? We do not currently charge for fire prevention plan reviews?
Correct. The fire department does not charge or get revenue for fire prevention plan reviews.
And specific to fire prevention plan reviews, when would that take place?
That occurs, they cycle the development plans or the construction plans through the fire department for those items.
You're doing that.
And during the pre-plan.
Right, this is part of the pre-construction meeting in that process.
Right, so we start with the pre-construction meeting, and then once the plans are submitted, they do get routed through my office, and we do a full fire and life safety plan review and give input to the building official at this point. And we also go out and conduct those new construction inspections with them.
All of that is free of charge specific to the fire department?
Correct.
Thanks.
So in trying to come up with alternative cost recovery methods, we were focusing on methods that were chosen by a variety of municipalities within Oregon, and attempted to be more normal in our recommendation rather than on one extreme or the other as far as the recommendations we could look at. Every one of these municipalities within the Oregon does one, some, or all of these items as their board members or council members have indicated was a priority for them. There are the few municipalities that are not up there, like Bend. They have other fee structures that come in place, like a water meter fee or some other things that go into the fire department in lieu of charging for these types of things. So that's why you don't see some. There's not a lot of municipal departments in Oregon. A large part of them are districts, and districts' rules about charging for cost recovery are a little bit different than municipalities. Don't get me wrong, there are districts who charge for some of the same things we're talking about, but not necessarily the same way because of the way their rules on their districting reimbursements work. So some of the options for council to consider and that we're here to put on the table to seek further direction on are we can expand the operational permits to include things we're not currently providing permits for. We can conduct new inspections or require new inspections for new businesses. We can charge inspection fees for first and subsequent inspections or any model thereof. We can apply city civil penalties to violations, and we can start charging for fire prevention plan reviews. The one thing that is currently being reviewed by legal counsel, or we're putting together some thoughts, are the lift assist and misuse of the EMS. We wanted to make sure that before we move forward in any way, shape, or form of that we were seeking legal counsel on what was appropriate and what wasn't appropriate according to our new charter amendment. That part was quick. I figured this part will take longer.
So let's open it up to questions for Chief, and we'll just go ahead, Adam.
Of those departments you pulled up, Chief, do any or some or none of them have fire levies that also help offset their costs? They're, like an operational levy?
Albany has a public safety levy. I don't know if it's expired or not yet. I know they had a public safety levy. And I couldn't speak.
Springfield has an operation.
I'm sorry? Springfield, okay. So those I know. I don't know the rest. I'm sorry, I didn't. I couldn't speak to the rest of it. And in working with Corvallis, their funding mechanism is really different. So it was difficult they have a large district that pays a lot of money into the fire system. So that was a little bit of a different methodology.
Does Albany or Springfield have similar misuse issues going on?
When I was at the fire chiefs conference, the majority of the fire chiefs that provide ambulance service or provide service to care facilities had misuse issues going on. Yes.
Okay.
Now, whether Albany was there or not, I can't remember if the chief was there or not, but that has been acknowledged pretty much statewide.
I guess off your next slide where you listed kind of options for funding, I'd have a hard time charging for fire prevention. I just think that, if we're being proactive and we're preventing something, that to me that would be the last place to start to increase fees. I think taking care of the bad apples is really the top priority, and making sure that's equitable across the board for every user. But another way to have equitable revenue is to consider a levy on that list as well, which I don't see up there, but I'd be open to looking at that as well.
I focused on the ordinance failure, and the area that we were working on was the fire prevention for the care facilities and the life safety issues with the care facilities. So we've kind of brought that back with things that were within the fire department's ability to find a funding mechanism for that. That's why this presentation is allocated the way you see it.
Appreciate that.
Other questions? Sal?
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, I've got two mics here, so double the pleasure. Chief, thank you for the presentation and the thought that you've put into trying to recover these costs. How much revenue are you looking to raise through these proposed fees to offset how much revenue are you looking to generate through this process?
So this year we had $100,000 budgeted in the budget for cost recovery from the ordinance that we revoked due to the election. So I don't know. I don't have a number in my head because we have to run the numbers of, I wanted to get direction from council before we knew, do we not want to do this? Do we want to do that? But the $100,000 is the number that we budgeted for this year that we will not recoup.
And what positions will that $100,000 of the revenue raised through this support in the department?
Well, I don't. So we have a floating firefighter position that equates to about $140,000, and we have a logistics position that equates to about $97,000.
And so essentially the support services that you're looking to fund, you're looking at about $100,000 in cost that supports positions related to those services. Is that?
Well, we're looking to expand revenues. So that the positions that we have, those two positions in particular, were brought on board to try and improve relieve the stress on the workforce on the floor, and both of them have been successful in doing that. The revenue stream from so we allocated the dollars for those from the general fund budget. The revenue stream from the other side is trying to offset some costs to offset that $100,000.
So you're trying to offset $100,000 of the shortfall to the general fund through this mechanism. And what's the total amount of the shortfall currently?
We budgeted $100,000, which
No. I mean the total shortfall for fire and EMS.
I understand the question, Mr.
How much do we take from the general fund on a regular basis to each year?
$1 million. I believe we're at $1 million this year.
So we're $1 million out of the general fund to provide these services, and this will recover $100,000 of that.
I don't have a number for this because I didn't.
But that's a number you're kind of kicking around at least a little bit.
No, that's the number that we lost
in
as
the
a
budget.
result of the ordinance.
That's the number you're working. I mean, okay, you're not.
I don't know that this will be $25,000 or $150,000 because I don't know what direction the council. I didn't run numbers based on any models, if that makes sense. I was waiting for further direction.
So I guess my feeling is I'm supportive of some cost recovery for this. I think it would be appropriate for you to move kind of slowly, work with some of the stakeholders that oppose the previous ordinance because we don't want to go down that same rabbit hole again necessarily. And beyond that, I agree with Adam. I think we ought to consider a levy. I think we should consider it on a short time scale. I think we should do it ahead of districting. I think we need to address the shortfall in a much bigger way than this proposal would address it. And so I guess that's my take. It's not that I'm against doing this. I think this may be a part of the solution, but I don't see it as the whole solution. And I feel that districting is going to take too long to get to address what I see as a critical shortfall. So.
Other comments? Kelly?
So as I look at this, it seems like in general, what we're trying to do is improve safety and to make people accountable to do. And basically all we're asking for is cost recovery, correct?
I'm sorry.
And basically all we're asking for is cost recovery when it comes down to the bottom line on this.
So the charges would be based on hours spent or work spent during for the inspection or the fee, except for the fines, which would fall into the category that the council's already approved under the civil penalty.
Although I'm well aware of the issues of the shortfall of the fire department and the concern over staffing issues, I'm still not quite ready for a levy personally. But I would support definitely some more work on this and to kind of have an idea where the numbers would go. I feel like for many years, McMinnville just simply hasn't been charging for things that they should in the way of planning and prevention and things like that, that other towns do. And I'm not entirely sure what all the reasons in the past have been, but I feel like we need to seriously contemplate change on this. I would agree with Sal, we probably need to approach this rather carefully and do a lot of talking. But I'm for this. It can work out, yeah.
Thank you, Kelly. Zach, any thoughts or comments?
Yeah, I think I need some help understanding a couple things. I'm going to ask a couple questions that ideally sound really stupid, but I think I just need to walk myself backwards in a couple processes that you guys do and better understand them. So the inspections thing, the inspections, right? So I'm starting a bookstore and I'm moving to an existing space and I open a bookstore. Do you show up at my door? Does that go on a registry? Am I on your 3-year inspection cycle? Am I on your 1-year inspection cycle? Am I on your 2-year? How do you guys know to it? Do I walk and knock on your door? I don't have to file a building permit and I just roll into a space that's ready to go for a bookstore. I buy all my books and I start selling my books. How do I get on your inspection schedule?
So that's one of the probably downfalls we have, is that if you just walk in and rent a space and move in, we have no way to track that within the city at this point. And so that's one of the thoughts here, is if you have to have a fire inspection prior to, one, you may not be moving into an occupancy or a building that is designed and able to have a bookstore. And so that's one of the issues we walk into. What if we walk into a bookstore is pretty kind of a lower level, but maybe you put in a glass blowing or something else, and we come in and you have propane and all that, it's going to be a higher hazard, and that building isn't designed or maybe zoned for that, then we have to go through all the change of use, and that's a pretty long process if we don't know ahead of time.
Who does? Assume that you only need like a mechanical permit to put in the propane lines and the ventilation, and you pull trade permits but no major building permit. Do you guys still get aware of that if I pull a propane permit to run gas lines to start my glass blowing operation on 3rd Street? So
it's probably not zoned and probably couldn't go in. Really, there's a whole lot of things going, because propane's a higher hazard. So is the building sprinkled? Does it have an alarm system? Does it have the proper exiting? All those things come into play. You're talking about a change of use. So you went from a bead store to a glass blowing, which are two different hazards.
But I've pulled a mechanical permit before, and I don't recall getting asked any of those questions. Are you doing this are you starting a glass blowing company in a building that isn't zoned for a glass building company? So how are you guys getting involved in that process?
So we get involved at the pre-application. So if the person has forethought enough to call and say, hey, I want to move this into there. But what we are finding is that we walk in and all of a sudden this is happening, and then we have to go through corrective measures, which often can take many, many months with trying to get the person to go through building and get the proper change of use and get the proper protections in there that are required, the proper exiting, the proper lighting. We don't have a very good tracking system within the city right now. So as we're moving to this, we're thinking if they at least have to come and have a fire inspection and talk with us, we can start the ball rolling and getting them into moving in the right direction. So you shouldn't be able, I don't know, some of that goes through building and planning, and I don't want to talk to their processes, but if you walk in and get a mechanical permit to install propane pipes and all that, they should be looking at whether or not you can do that in there.
Okay.
So we kind of get brought in, sometimes the tail end, sometimes we're just out in our inspection cycle on 2nd Street or 4th Street or Lafayette Highway, and
Right.
we walk in and this whole new occupancy, or no new businesses in there, and that's how we find out the information.
Okay, so that leads me to my next question.
Okay.
You go out on your day and you see, oh wow, okay, somebody's started a glass blowing operation on 2nd Street, and that's you know you're not on our radar, you're not on our list, you made it through. Congratulations, we're the fire department. What happens?
So then we would start working with the person or the business owner to try and get them into compliance and what they need to do to make either the space that they've now occupying meet code or what they need to do. And sometimes then we have to we'll send back and we work with the building department to get the proper permits to maybe add another exit to, if you have to add sprinkler systems, it's things like that. It can be a long process. We try and educate and move people along as we can. The idea is never really to ever shut anyone down. We haven't necessarily had to have that happen.
Right, how can we get you safe? Not, you can't do any of this. Yep.
Right.
How can we get this
And compliant,
safe?
right.
So let's say that now the next step is you've discovered Jim's Glass Blowing Company, you've got them safe, you've got the public safe to be in that space. And you've inspected and you walk away. Have you charged anything for any of that?
No.
Okay. I'm in favor of recovering costs for that process. Additionally, the plan review as part of your guys' process in building permits. So when you are doing a big enough project that you come in, I'm in favor of charging a plan review fee for that, as well as which would include ideally the inspection part of that.
Right.
So I think, assume you're gonna have to make an inspection, and I'm in favor of including a re-inspect. Just assume you're gonna have to go back and
Right.
check out the things that you put on the list. I think that's just a natural charge for halftime or whatever for assumed second shorter trip.
Yeah, and there's, some of the cities do it where, because a person already pays for their building permits and plan review to that they just get a percentage of that for the
Sure.
amount of work that the fire department's doing instead versus.
Sure. Charge about plan review and inspection. I have another question sort of in the, do I still have time?
You know,
I should go last more often. On the inspection thing, so let's say a member of the public goes into a retail store or a thrift shop and thinks, man, I just don't feel safe. And they call you and you go there. Are they now onboarded into that process, or do you guys go do that? Is there a method for people to, I'm concerned that this thing is a tinderbox. I saw a guy welding in the back on his thrift shop, and I'm concerned. Is there a process for that? Is it just code enforcement? Do I call?
It would fall into the fire marshal's office. So
Okay.
if someone calls in with a complaint, we will go out and investigate the complaint, typically anonymously. Even if they give us our name, we never tell the business owner. We just say we're here to do a fire inspection. We may say that we've got a complaint, but we never really, it doesn't really matter where it came from at that point. If there's some violations happening, we work with them to correct it. And a lot of the process we've used over the years is to try and educate so that maybe next time we come back in 2 years and we've done enough educating that they maintain their systems the way they're supposed to, and they have those third-party inspections, and they are in compliance, or mostly, and we just kind of readjust and move on.
If I could take 1 second to speak to one part of the civil penalties portion. Chief McDermott and her staff do an outstanding job of using education as the primary tool to gain compliance. But occasionally we have maybe vendors who routinely do work in the community without permits when everyone else is doing permits, and the unpermitted work is not appropriate. Those types of fees would allow us to address those individuals working and doing unpermitted work, particularly around in our realm. And the other item just to take a step back, and one example about your glass blowing, we've had some folks come in and rent some pretty large properties, only to find out that the business that they wanted to move into that property would require much more work and dollars than they were willing to contribute to that. So that's where our initial finding a way to get the new business owner in the door early is a paramount to us, and we don't have a method for that.
Do you know how many of those, sort of maybe the other list of the programs or just any other programs, dovetail those programs with business licensing?
A large portion of the municipalities use business licensing as the first step in driving all of this.
Hey, I see you're applying for a glass blowing operation.
Right. You should stop by. The fire department will be on the checklist
Right.
of the permitting process that goes through that.
Interesting.
Are there alternatives to business licensing?
There are business registries without a license fee. That has to be managed by someone somehow, but same process. When you walk into the community, you have to fill out the form and give them the information and let them know what's going on, and then it runs through the same cycle. There's just not a charge for that process. It's called
Okay.
business registration. Some of the municipalities use that.
Any other thoughts on that or possibilities?
I've been an advocate for some sort of identification of new businesses and existing businesses for quite some time in McMinnville, because we have a struggle with changing businesses and changing occupants of businesses in the middle of the night when we're trying to find someone because they have a water leak or they're fire or there's an alarm going off, and that was 3 owners ago. So we have a definite need for that kind of a
Yes, I can see that. Thank you.
I think on your list of sort of frequency of inspections, one of the ones that was farther out was storage units. Is that correct? Much to my confusion, that seems to be a very popular thing for people to do and use is storage units. And it also seems that in the last few years, the use and intention of those has changed drastically. So as far as like, oh, you got some grandma's couches, we need to store grandma's couches there, it's changed to something so drastic as people running small operations out of storage units. Has fire code or building code or changed to keep up with some of those maybe more hazardous uses in an otherwise potentially banal, what's supposed to be a banal use of a space has become more maybe volatile or hazardous? Do you find that, are we behind the times in how we treat those spaces? Because it seemed shocking that storage units were so infrequently inspected and reviewed.
So storage units fall in an odd, they're similar to apartment buildings that once somebody rents that space, it's their private space. And if it's not a business, because fire code allows us to inspect any business during normal business hours and reasonable times, The S occupancies, unless they're part of another commercial one where it is employee space or that, but if it's just strictly storage, is similar to an apartment where we can inspect the common spaces if there's an office or if there's a laundry room, say in apartments, but for those storage units, we cannot just go and force people to open up and let us look at what they're doing.
It's diabolical.
If we happen to go by and see that someone's operating a business and that's not allowed within there, either by lease or otherwise, then we can work with it on that basis. But they're kind of in a weird protected because it's their private space and the whole right, refusal can't in proper search and all that stuff. So they do fall out there. There can be, as we all know, and when we do operations, we know there could be anything in those, and we have to be careful. So they are an odd class on their own.
Interesting. Okay, so would this be a time also in sort of fire department revenue generation, maybe not fee, but otherwise, to talk about that SAFER grant that we've talked about before? And if we're talking, we've brought up levies and supporting levies. I'd like to see what the structure of the SAFER grant looks like. I know it's a financial, I know it's a financial commitment, but I don't know what that financial commitment is. And if we're talking about a runway for the fire department that includes options such as levies and districting, how does a running start like the SAFER grant play into that. So I'm interested in seeing a framework of here's, I know you don't know what it looks like until the period opens, but I'd like to see what that looks like when it opens and what are scenarios and how does that affect the levy and how does that, if we do a levy and how would that affect the district if we did a district and how do all three of those dance together?
Right. I can absolutely, once we find out what the structure is, I can bring that to council for review or email it through city manager for council's purview to take a look at what that looks like. And
yeah, I think we've got a complex and potentially dire enough issue with the funding of the fire department that I would like to see all three of those, how they act independently and how they dance together. Yeah. I don't know how everyone else feels.
One of the challenges that we face currently as we speak, as we're going through this feasibility study, the feasibility study is going to give us a pretty good indication of the actual dollars and service levels that we're going to be needing to obtain. That doesn't mean I can't guess, but I mean, it would be a guess as to how many people for the grant. So what kind of a levy does that look like to get to what the district is actually going to be able to fund? So the timing of the three are very important to make sure we don't do anything that's going to either upend the district or put us behind the power curve. That being said, I'll absolutely do the work and bring it to you as soon as we have the information.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that. I think that concludes my 20 minutes.
Okay.
I think it's a
Other
seat
questions,
thing.
Adam?
I think it's the chair you're sitting in.
What?
I think it's the chair.
Well, I have to do the talking for this half of the table. I haven't got to Remy's portion I'm going to fill in yet.
A couple questions that I have, Chief. We know Tualatin, Newburgh are part of a fire district.
That's correct.
With a number of other communities. Kaiser, they're part of a fire district, are they not?
Correct.
Northern Marion County, is it?
No, Kaiser is their own fire department, but they also, I believe, are contracted with a small district that goes around, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, much like, okay.
Similar to us, if I'm not mistaken. I might be mistaken.
Okay.
It might be just Kaiser Fire Department for the city, but I think they have some contracts out there for something. I'm not sure exactly.
Oregon City?
Oregon City's part of Tualatin Valley, or Clackamas. Clackamas.
Clackamas? Grants Pass?
Grants Pass, I could not find any information, and Grants Pass still runs a little bit of a convoluted fire police integrated system, but they did not have any fee structures identified anywhere on their system.
And Corvallis, you'd mentioned.
And Corvallis has permits, but they don't charge for permits, but they have a really high cost deferment, or their rural district pays a really large amount of money into the fire department to compensate for the.
I was just naming some of those communities that are within the
Right.
population scheme as we are. I think from my perspective, what I'd like to do is, as we go through this learning process, you indicate there's approximately 25 fees out there that certain districts are charging for, utilizing, and those types of things. I'd really like to see a listing of comparable cities. Again, if they're in a fire district, no.
Right.
Okay, because you can't go, it's not an apples to apples comparison. But I think if we can take a look at those different fees, who's participating in them and the costs associated with that a bit, so that we can get an idea.
For the operational permits?
Yes.
Yeah.
I would share with you that, as many of the counselors have mentioned, education is probably the last area that I'd want to charge for. I think preventative and educational pieces, and I think we can do that in a bigger scale. There's some economies of scale if we do that a little differently. But I'd like to take a look at the comparisons to see kind of what we're looking at and the impact that charging for fees would have for us. I'm one that if we come up with a situation where we're going in the second, third, and fourth time, there needs to be a punitive, they need to be much larger because they're taking much more of our time and resources, and we should be able to share with them what we expect to have happen and it happen. So those would be my thoughts, along with, you've heard from the other counselors. Again, I don't know that I am at this particular time enamored with a a levy approach, because as we're trying to put our district together, we've got to be able to have those comparisons among the cities that we're going to maybe go with. And levies, I think, convolute a little bit of how we can bring those together. So those are my thoughts. I hope we've been giving you enough to kind of know where to go and come back to us.
Yeah, I think we have some work to do, and we can bring back some information and based on the council's direction, some recommendations on at least some preliminary issues before we moved any further with public comment.
Again, I'll just look. Any further questions or comments from this part of the dais? And Zach?
I did think of it. How much time do you guys spend on food carts? You touched on food carts.
So seasonally, right now we're not as much, but every event that we have to kind of re-inspect them. It'd be nice if we had an annual inspection where they got a permit or something that they could have in their cart.
You said events, right? So
any of our special events, and anyone, because they may be coming from out of town, so we do have to inspect those.
Right, so you have the event and you get the fire department permit for the event, and you roll in and inspect whatever's going on, all the food carts included. What about all those ones that are out there just doing business day to day?
We've been, it just in 2019 came into the fire code, which just started mid-November. So we really didn't, it was an ODOT issue because anything on wheels falls under ODOT. So we have just now gained the authority technically to go in and do a full inspection. But we have been, and we have a lot of cooperation from our local food carts, and they've been kind of given notice what the up and coming codes are going to be. So they're going to have to kind of plan on.
So again, to dive into the specifics, right now, a food cart has whatever regulations they need to hold and licenses they need to hold, and you guys go do the inspections and gain compliance, and that is a no-charge process.
Yes.
But if you have to go back once or twice or three times, that is all no charge just to gain compliance?
Right now, we have the first and second inspection are no charge. Third inspection would start a fee process
Okay.
for every subsequent.
And then is there any designation on what's in between sort of interior restaurant and food cart? So, for example, like Tequila Grill's outdoor cooking area, that's not a food cart, but that's not indoor business, or is it? The requirements for safety are very similar. If they're using propane, the hoses, all those things need to be inspected. If they're inside, the hood systems. So there's just just like any. Just an expansion of the retail operation or whatever. Okay.
Or the cooking operations are cooking operations. Just how big and what the requirements. If they are in a brick and mortar building, there's heavier requirements on the building, not necessarily the cooking operation.
So outside of special events, which you guys are charging a permit for and going and doing inspections for, how much time are you spending on just general food carts outside of special events? Just cocktail napkin, thumb guess.
Over the whole year? In the summer, a lot of time, and it's really hard for me to judge.
Not a lot of time, medium, fair. You don't find it too onerous, or it's onerous?
Per food cart, it's probably 15 minutes to half hour per event. So it's hard to judge.
Okay.
I mean, we have probably 15 or so that I don't eat at them very often, so I couldn't tell you, but we probably have 15 or so that are set up all the time. I know that the Deputy Fire Marshal has inspected all of those.
Okay.
And then any that come into town for events.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Zach.
I rest.
Any other comments?
But in the case of that one, that would be an operational permit that we could authorize, so that individual would only have that once a year, and then we wouldn't be back. Even if they came to an event, they would get out of jail free.
Get certified
and be done.
Roll in.
Be done.
You've already
for the
checked
year
this,
in
don't worry
McMinnville.
about it.
Right.
I guess the only other comment that I would have, mostly in response to the mayor's comments about not being interested in a levy, I really think we should poll the board, if not tonight, at the next meeting, to see if there's support on the board, a majority of support on the board for going forward with a public safety levy, whether that's just fire or fire and police, if there's staffing shortages that need to be addressed in both departments. I feel very strongly about that in 2020, that we need to move more quickly. I appreciate the desire to recover $100,000 in costs, but we're looking at a $1.4 million shortfall, and I just don't feel like we're doing enough. So I just want to make that really clear.
Thank you, Sal. Any other comments? And so I think you've got your charge a bit, and that we'll have that back before us. I know we only have one additional council meeting before us through the end of the year with, well, I guess this is the last one for the year. So these will be issues that are brought over to 2020. Thank you.
Thank you.
That is our agenda for our work session this evening. I'll go ahead and dismiss us from the work session. 7 o'clock, we'll be back at City Council regular session.
I think I could have said that any more strongly.